Why did the room go quiet the moment she walked in? Not respectful quiet. Not professional silence. The kind that comes when grown men don't know whether to laugh or complain. She stood near the back wall of the briefing room, helmet tucked under one arm, boots barely touching the floor when she leaned back. Her uniform was correct. Her posture was perfect. Still, every eye drifted to her the same way people stared at something that didn't belong. Someone whispered it before they meant to. "She's 12. A few chuckles followed, soft, careless. She didn't react. Specialist Ara Vance had learned long ago that reacting was what people wanted. Surprise, anger, tears, proof that she was exactly what they assumed she was. Small, fragile, temporary. The mission map glowed against the concrete wall. An industrial complex, 5 floors, reinforced interior, kill zones layered like traps inside traps. Intelligence confirmed over 100 hostile fighters inside, maybe more. A SEAL platoon would breach, extract an HVT, get out. Simple on paper, deadly in reality. Ara listened without looking up, absorbing angles, distances, airflow diagrams only she seemed to care about. Her fingers traced invisible lines on her thigh geometry, not nerves. Then the argument started. She doesn't fit the profile. She's not built for this. Send Miller through the vent. She'll get stuck. That was when the captain's voice cut through the noise. She fits, you don't. End of discussion. The room froze. Ara didn't look up, not yet. When she finally did, her eyes were calm. Too calm for someone everyone else thought was a child. "I'm already rigged, sir," she said. "Suppressor attached, drag minimized." Someone scoffed. The Master Chief stepped closer, towering over her. His shadow swallowed her whole. "You know if you go in there," he said quietly, "you don't come back out if it goes bad. No comms, no rescue." Ara met his eyes. "I've been invisible my whole life, Chief," she replied. "Why start seeing me now?" Silence. Then the nod. Green light, go. 14 hours earlier, the locker room at Fob Copperhead smelled like sweat, oil, and ego. Ara sat on a bench too high for her feet to touch the floor, lacing her boots with methodical precision. Around her, men joked loudly, armor clanking, confidence spilling everywhere. "Hey, Pixie," someone called. "Don't forget your juice box." Laughter. She didn't look up. Her rifle lay across her knees, modified, shortened, tuned specifically to her frame. She checked the chamber. Again. A man twice her size leaned closer. "You really think that toy's gonna save you?" She smiled faintly. "It only has to save me once." The laughter faded when the Master Chief entered. He stopped in front of her, kicked her boot. "You lag, I leave you," he said. "I don't carry mascots." "I don't lag," Ara answered. He stared at her like he wanted to argue, then turned away. Outside, the helicopter hovered instead of landing. Dust and wind swallowed them whole as they fast-roped into darkness. The march was brutal. For the others, it was routine. For Ara, it was survival math. 2 steps for every one of theirs. Every obstacle a climb. Every minute a reminder that the world wasn't built to her proportions. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She stayed quiet. When she saw the tripwire, thin, deliberate, placed at her eye level, she froze the entire platoon with one whispered word. "Freeze." They didn't thank her when they realized she'd saved their lives. They called it luck. Luck didn't feel like this. Luck didn't bleed later. Inside the factory, everything went wrong in seconds. Lights exploded on. Machine guns opened up from above. An RPG detonated so close it shook the soul out of the room. Men went down. Screams replaced orders. Ara found cover behind a machine too large for anyone else to fully hide behind. She fired not to kill, but to create space. When the steel supply door slammed shut behind them, the silence was worse than the gunfire. They were trapped. No comms. Low ammo. No exit. Someone whispered it before they could stop themselves. "We're dead." Ara didn't argue. She studied the evacuation map. Then the wall. Then the grate. "This backs into the ventilation exchange," she said quietly. The men looked at her. Then at the opening. Then at themselves. She was already unbuckling her armor. "I fit," she said. "You don't." The Master Chief grabbed her shoulder. "You get stuck in there, you die." She met his eyes again. No fear, no drama. "Staying here," she said. "We all die." He let go. Crawling into the vent felt like being swallowed alive. Steel pressed into her ribs. Dust filled her mouth. Every sound felt like a scream. She moved inch by inch, pushing the rifle ahead of her, pulling herself forward with bleeding elbows. When panic rose, she crushed it down with memory. "You've been alone before. This is just another quiet room." She heard voices beneath her, enemies staging areas, RPG teams preparing. She took the shot through the mesh not because it was heroic, but because it was necessary. The man never knew where death came from. She didn't feel relief. Only urgency. Climbing the vertical shaft cost her blood and water. She cut away her hydration pack to survive the ascent, left it behind without ceremony. Thirst would come later. Death was now. On the mezzanine, enemy snipers hunted her back. She hunted them first. One mistake, one missed shot, one alarm. The vents became a firing line. Bullets tore through steel inches from her head. She dropped through a bathroom ceiling by accident or fate. The fight there was ugly, close, personal. She survived because she understood anatomy better than rage. When the man collapsed, bleeding out on tile, she didn't feel victory. She felt heavy. There was no time to grieve it. She climbed again. At the top, she found the command center. 8 targets. 5 bullets. Despair came quietly, not as panic as arithmetic. Then geometry answered. 2 heads aligned. Glass, refraction, deflection. She adjusted. Fired. The impossible happened because she had done the math no one else could. When the room went dark, she owned it. She dropped into chaos with empty lungs and shaking hands, took weapons from the dead, became noise instead of silence. Below her, the seals ran. She gave them fire. She gave them time. She gave them a way out. By the time reinforcements arrived, the building was quiet again. Later on the extraction bird, no one laughed. No one joked. Miller sat across from her, eyes hollow. "You okay?" She looked at her hands, still shaking. "I think," she said slowly, "I will be." The Master Chief finally spoke as the helicopter lifted. "You saved us." Ara nodded once. Not proud. Not smiling. Just present. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it doesn't look the way we expect. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts. Why did her hand stop shaking the moment the vent swallowed her whole? Not because the fear was gone. Because fear had finally become familiar. The steel closed in around Ara Vance like a coffin being gently sealed. The sounds of the supply room, boots scraping concrete, labored breathing, whispered countdowns to death, faded behind her as she dragged herself forward inch by inch into darkness that felt alive. The world narrowed to metal and breath. She pushed the rifle ahead of her, then pulled her body after it. Push, drag, freeze, listen. Every scrape sounded like a confession. her chest pressed flat against the galvanized floor, ribs aching with each breath. The duct was barely wider than her shoulders, barely tall enough to let her turn her head. Dust coated her lips. Old insulation scratched her cheek. Somewhere behind her, a bullet slammed into the steel door she'd just left, the vibration rippling through the vent like a pulse. They're still alive, she thought. Good, stay that way. Her night vision was useless here. The focal distance bloomed into green static. She flipped it up and closed one eye, letting her other adjust to nothing. This wasn't blindness. This was subtraction. Sound, touch, pressure, memory. She remembered being 9 years old, hiding inside an air duct at a public library after a lockdown drill went wrong, and no one remembered she'd crawled in there. 37 minutes of silence. 37 minutes of breathing slow so no one would hear her. You don't panic in tight places, she reminded herself. You think. Her boot struck a rivet. The clang felt like a gunshot. Ara froze mid-breath, cheek pressed into dust, heart hammering so hard she was sure it would echo down the shaft. She waited, counted to 10, counted again. Nothing. She exhaled slowly, the taste of rust filling her mouth, and moved again. The heat rose quickly. Warm air carried smells from below: sweat, tobacco, oil, human presence, close. She stopped. The metal beneath her vibrated, not from machinery, from voices. Ara pressed her ear to the duct floor. Arabic, command tones, movement. This wasn't a random corridor. This was a staging area. She edged forward until a hairline crack in the seam let a blade of yellow light cut into the darkness. Through it, she saw the top of a man's head. Then a second. Then weapons laid out with intent. RPGs. Her stomach tightened. They weren't waiting anymore. She pulled back just enough to raise the rifle, positioning it flat against the duct floor. The mesh below her was thin, too thin to trust, too loud to cut. This wasn't a sniper's shot. It was a problem-solving exercise under a clock. Range short, angle steep, obstruction uncertain. She waited. Outside, a distant mortar struck the building, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The RPG gunner below braced himself, adjusting his stance. Now, Ara squeezed. The suppressed shot vanished into the concussion of the explosion outside. The man dropped without a sound, the launcher clattering harmlessly to concrete. She didn't stay to admire it. She moved. Time was bleeding out faster than ammo. The vertical riser loomed ahead like a black throat, 15 feet straight up. No ladder, no grip, just friction and faith. She cinched her sling tight, pressing the rifle flat against her spine, and stepped into the shaft. Back against one wall, boots against the other. Push, slide, lock, breathe. Her legs burned almost immediately. Sweat stung the cuts on her arms. The heat wrapped around her like wet cloth. Halfway up, something snagged. She tried to move, couldn't. Her hydration pack strap had caught on a jagged bracket, pinning her mid-climb. She couldn't reach it, couldn't let go without falling. The metal groaned when she shifted. Below her, voices grew louder. She didn't curse, didn't cry. She pulled her knife and cut the strap. The weight vanished. Her body lurched. She caught herself by instinct alone, muscles screaming as she wedged the water pouch into the bracket so it wouldn't crash down and betray her. She stared at it for half a second, then climbed. When she collapsed into the second-floor duct, her mouth felt like sandpaper. Her vision blurred at the edges. She rested just long enough to not pass out. Then she crawled again. The mezzanine was a sniper's balcony. She saw them through the slats, 3 men, disciplined, patient, pinning her team down with mechanical precision. She lined up the first shot and took it. The second went wrong. The third saved her life. Then the vents betrayed her. Rounds punched through steel inches from her head. Light exploded where darkness had been. The hunter below was good, very good. She scrambled, abandoning elegance for survival, turning corners on instinct, breath ragged, arms burning. The junction ahead was blocked. No forward, no back. Gunfire closed in. She saw the grate beneath her and didn't hesitate. She kicked. The metal gave way. She fell. 8 feet. Bathroom tiles shattered under her boots as she landed in a crouch, weapon up, heart in her throat. She wasn't alone. The man froze, mid-motion, disbelief plastered across his face. His rifle leaned against the wall just out of reach. For one absurd second, they stared at each other. Then he moved. Her rifle clicked. Empty. She dropped it and drew her knife as he roared and swung the AK like a club. She ducked, stayed inside his reach, took a hit to the back that stole her breath and sent her crashing into porcelain. Pain exploded. His hand closed on her throat. The world narrowed again. She found the artery because she knew where it was, because knowledge was the only strength she'd ever been allowed. When he fell bleeding out on tile, she slid down the wall, gasping, shaking, staring at her red hands like they belonged to someone else. Voices shouted outside the door. No time. She forced herself up and vanished again, into pipes, into darkness, into the spaces no one ever checked. By the time she reached the top floor, she was bleeding, dehydrated, exhausted, and very aware that she was still alone. But below her, the gunfire had changed. The rhythm was breaking. That meant hope. And hope, she knew, was dangerous. But she crawled toward it anyway. Why did the noise change below her? Why did chaos suddenly sound afraid? Ara Vance paused inside the ceiling void, one knee wedged against a steel beam, chest heaving as she listened. Gunfire still echoed through the factory, but the rhythm was different now. Less confident, less coordinated, like a heartbeat skipping. Something had broken. She wiped sweat and blood from her eyes with the back of her glove and forced herself to stay still. Moving too soon would get her killed. Moving too late might get everyone else killed first. She crawled forward, careful not to put weight on the acoustic tiles beneath her. They bowed under pressure, fragile as promises. Below her, the command center breathed, voices, radios, orders snapping back and forth like whips. This was the brain. She found a gap where cables ran through the ceiling and pressed her eye close. The room below was large, organized, clean in a way violence always tried to pretend it was. Maps spread across tables. Screens flickered. Men in matching black gear moved with purpose, not panic. Professionals. Her stomach tightened. 6 guards, 2 leaders. She counted again. Counted exits. Counted angles. Counted the distance to the nearest beam that might hold her weight if she had to drop. She reached for a spare magazine. Nothing. Her fingers froze. She checked again, then again. Gone. She pulled the magazine from her rifle and tilted it, squinting at the witness holes in the dim light filtering through the ceiling. 5 rounds. That was it. The realization didn't crash over her. It settled, heavy, inevitable. 5 bullets, 8 targets. She leaned her forehead against the beam and closed her eyes for half a second, letting the despair touch her without letting it stay. This was the part no one talked about. Not fear, not pain. The moment when the math doesn't work anymore. She opened her eyes and looked again, not at the men but at the room. Geometry, she reminded herself. Not bravery, not rage, geometry. The 2 leaders paced behind a heavy table. One was older, calm, confident. The other, the sniper leader, moved like a predator denied his kill. He gestured sharply, anger bleeding through control. Every time they argued, they crossed paths. Ara's breath slowed. 2 silhouettes, 1 line. She eased the rifle forward, cutting a small opening in the tile with her knife. slow enough that the dust drifted down unnoticed. She lowered the barrel through the hole and settled behind the scope. The magnification was too high. She dialed it back. Her hands were steady despite the exhaustion. This was familiar. This was her language. The moment stretched. Then she saw the reflection. Glass. Not open air, not a clean shot. Her heart kicked hard once. Bullet-resistant panel, internal booth, angled. Refraction, deflection. The image was lying. She adjusted. Aimed lower, much lower, a place that looked wrong, a place any other sniper would dismiss. The radio below crackled. Awaiting order. The leaders leaned together. Now. She exhaled. The shot shattered the ceiling space with violent thunder, the recoil slamming into her shoulder as reinforced glass exploded below. The round tore through the sniper leader and kept going, carrying death into the man behind him. Two bodies fell like marionettes with their strings cut. For one perfect, impossible second, the room went silent. Then everything screamed. She didn't wait. She fired again into the breaker panel. Sparks erupted, lights died, darkness swallowed the command center whole. Ara flipped her night vision down, the world blooming green and grainy, and dropped through the shattered opening. She hit the table hard, glass slicing her palms, blood slick under her boots. Flashlights snapped on, beams wild and frantic. She moved. Shot from the hip. One down. Another. Down. The rifle locked back. Empty. She dropped it without looking and dove, bullets chewing wood above her head. She rolled, drew her sidearm, fired controlled pairs the way muscle memory demanded. One guard fell screaming, another didn't scream at all. She grabbed a carbine from a collapsing body, felt its weight settle into her hands like borrowed authority, and kept moving. When the last guard fell, the silence returned, thick, suffocating, unreal. She stood alone in the wreckage of the command center, chest heaving, ears ringing, blood dripping from her fingers onto maps that no longer mattered. She didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow. She grabbed a radio from a dead man's vest, switched frequencies by instinct, and spoke in a voice that wasn't quite hers. Advance to the courtyard, cease fire on the supply room. Below her, the enemy moved. She ran to the windows, smashed the glass and looked down. The SEALs burst from the supply room into chaos. Rogan, Miller, Davis, running straight into a wall of fighters. They were about to be swallowed. Ara didn't hesitate. She mounted the stolen rifle on the ledge and opened fire. This wasn't precision anymore. It was protection. She cut down RPG teams, shattered machine gun nests, forced space into existence where there had been none. The suppressor overheated, failed. The rifle roared now, loud and unmistakable. Every enemy in the building knew where she was. Bullets struck the wall around her, snapping concrete, clipping her helmet hard enough to make stars explode behind her eyes. She stayed. Reloaded. Fired. Below, the SEALs moved faster now, using the chaos she created as cover, breaking through the collapsing enemy line. Ara's arms burned. Her vision swam. Her mouth was so dry it felt like her tongue might crack. When the rifle finally clicked empty again, she dropped behind the wall just as a burst shredded the window frame where her head had been seconds earlier. She slid down, back against concrete, breathing hard, laughing once, a broken, disbelieving sound. She had done it. Not cleanly, not perfectly. But she had done it. Sirens wailed in the distance now, friendly birds inbound. The sound of the fight was dying. Ara closed her eyes for a moment, exhaustion finally catching her, and wondered, briefly, quietly, how many of the men below would ever know her name. Then she stood up. Because she wasn't finished yet. Why did the quiet after the gunfire feel heavier than the fight itself? Ara Vance pushed herself up from the concrete wall, legs trembling in a way she could no longer hide. The courtyard below was chaos in its final phase, smoke drifting, bodies unmoving, SEALs shouting orders with voices that sounded farther away than they should have. The building groaned as if it were tired of holding itself together. She checked the stolen rifle, one magazine left, half full. Her hands were slick with blood, some hers, most not. She wiped them on her pants without thinking. The pain in her back throbbed now that adrenaline had loosened its grip. Each breath felt shallow, incomplete, like her lungs were forgetting how to expand all the way. She keyed the radio again. "Extraction corridor is open," she said. "West stairwell is compromised. Use the loading ramp." Static answered her first. Then Miller's voice, strained, disbelieving. "Who the hell is this?" Ara swallowed. "Does it matter?" A pause, gunfire in the background. Then quieter, "Copy." She moved away from the shattered window, limping now, dragging one leg she hadn't realized had gone numb. The hallway beyond the command center was dark, emergency lights pulsing red like a warning heartbeat. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her flinch. She had become the thing she feared most, alone, visible, hunted. Her radio crackled again. This time it was the Master Chief. "You still breathing?" he asked. She almost laughed. "Yes," she said, "for now." "Where are you?" She hesitated, gave him a landmark instead of a location. "Top floor, north side." Another pause, longer. "You did all this?" She didn't answer. She didn't know how to explain that it hadn't felt like doing. It had felt like reacting, like falling forward and refusing to hit the ground. Footsteps echoed somewhere down the hall. Not friendly. She killed the radio and moved. Her body protested every step. Her vision tunneled at the edges. The emergency lights smeared into red ghosts when she turned her head too fast. She leaned against the wall, counted her breaths, forced herself onward. A door burst open ahead of her. She fired without aiming. The man dropped, sliding across the floor, weapon skittering away. Another figure froze behind him, young, wide-eyed, terrified. They stared at each other. For one suspended moment, neither moved. He lowered his weapon first. Ara felt something inside her twist. She didn't want to pull the trigger again. She didn't want to add another face to the weight already pressing on her chest. She backed away slowly, rifle trained, and disappeared down the stairwell. The stairs were worse than the climb. Each step sent pain shooting up her spine. She clutched the railing, half sliding, half falling, leaving a smear of blood behind her. Halfway down, her legs gave out. She sat hard on the concrete, head falling back against the wall, eyes closing despite herself. Darkness crept in, soft and tempting. Just a minute, she thought. Just breathe. Footsteps pounded above her. She forced her eyes open, heart surging, rifle snapping back into her hands. The Master Chief skidded to a stop 3 steps above her. They stared at each other. He looked different up close, smaller somehow, human. "You're bleeding," he said unnecessarily. "So are you," she replied. He glanced down at her legs, her shaking hands, the empty hydration pack strap dangling uselessly from her vest. "You should have stayed put," he said quietly. "I couldn't," she answered. "You needed time." Something shifted in his expression, not pride, not relief. Recognition. He held out a hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. He hauled her to her feet like she weighed nothing, slinging her arm over his shoulder without ceremony. Together, they moved down the stairs as the building shook again, controlled demolitions going off, friendly this time. Outside, the night air hit her like a wave, cool, sharp, real. Helicopters thundered overhead, floodlights cut through smoke, Medics rushed forward, voices urgent, hands everywhere. Someone tried to take her rifle. She tightened her grip. "I'm done," she said hoarsely. "I'm done." The Master Chief pried her fingers loose himself, nodding to the medic. "She's done." As they loaded her onto a stretcher, Ara stared up at the stars, blinking against the light, the noise, the sudden unreality of survival. Miller appeared at her side, helmet gone, face streaked with grime and blood. "That was you," he said softly, not accusing, not mocking. She didn't respond. "You saved my life," he continued, "all of ours." Ira turned her head just enough to look at him. Her voice was thin, almost lost in the roar of the rotors. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I just didn't want anyone else to die." He swallowed, nodded. As the helicopter lifted, the factory shrinking beneath them, Aura finally let her eyes close. Sleep didn't come. Instead, memories pressed in, faces, flashes of movement, the sound of glass breaking, the weight of the knife in her hand. Her heart raced, then stuttered, then raced again. A medic noticed, squeezed her shoulder. "You're safe now." Ara didn't answer. She wasn't sure safety was a place you returned to. Back at the fob, the noise faded into routine. Boots on concrete, radios chirping, the smell of antiseptic replacing smoke. They stitched her up in silence. No one asked her age. No one joked. Later, alone in the infirmary, Ara sat on the edge of the cot, feet dangling like they always had, staring at her bandaged hands. She thought about the boy in the hallway, the way he'd looked at her like she was something unreal, something impossible. She wondered what he would remember. She wondered what she would. Outside, someone laughed, normal laughter. The sound felt foreign. Ara lay back and closed her eyes again, exhaustion finally pulling her under. In the quiet before sleep, one thought surfaced, heavy and unavoidable. They wouldn't laugh next time. But she wasn't sure that mattered anymore. Why did waking up feel harder than surviving the fight? Ara Vance opened her eyes to white light and the steady, merciless beep of a monitor. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The smell was wrong, too clean. The air didn't carry smoke or dust or the metallic tang of fear. Then her body remembered. Pain bloomed everywhere at once, sharp and insistent, dragging a gasp from her throat. Her hand twitched instinctively, searching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Easy," a voice said quickly. "You're safe." Safe. The word felt fragile, temporary. She turned her head and found a medic standing beside the bed, older, calm, eyes that had seen this before. He adjusted something on the IV line and watched her carefully. "You've been out for 6 hours," he said. "Concussion, dehydration, couple of cracked ribs, you're lucky." Ara stared at the ceiling. Lucky wasn't the word she would have chosen. The medic waited, then added gently, "They're asking about you." She swallowed, her throat burned. "Who's they?" "Everyone." That scared her more than the gunfire had. When they finally let her sit up, the world tilted dangerously. She closed her eyes, breathed through it, forced her hands to stop shaking. The shaking bothered her more than the pain. It felt like weakness made visible. The Master Chief came in without knocking. He stood awkwardly near the foot of the bed, helmet under his arm like a man who didn't know what to do with his hands. "They want to debrief you," he said. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. He frowned, "No." She studied his face, searching for the unspoken. "Then why do you look like that?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I was wrong." The admission hung between them, heavy and sincere. "You shouldn't have been there," he continued. "Not because you didn't belong, because I should have protected you better." Ara looked away. "You did." He shook his head. "You protected us." They sat in silence for a while after that. Later, the room filled with people, officers, intelligence analysts, a woman in a pressed uniform who didn't introduce herself. Questions came fast. Technical, precise, detached. Ara answered what she could. She didn't talk about the boy in the hallway, or the way her hands still felt like they were holding a knife, or how every time someone raised their voice, her heart leapt into her throat. When they asked her how she felt, she said, "Fine." It was easier than explaining that she felt split in two. Word traveled fast. By evening, the whispers outside the infirmary weren't about her age anymore. They were about numbers, about shots, about impossible angles and a command center that had gone dark at exactly the wrong moment for the enemy. Someone called her a miracle. Someone else called her a weapon. Neither felt right. Miller came by after dark, quieter than usual, carrying 2 cups of terrible coffee. He set one on the bedside table like an offering. "They're grounding us for 48, he said. "Mandatory rest." She nodded. He hesitated, then sat. "You know, when I first saw you in that briefing room, I thought it was a joke." She didn't respond. "I was scared," he admitted. "Didn't want to be responsible if something happened to you." Her voice was soft. "Something did happen." He looked at her, then really looked. "Yeah, it did." They drank the coffee in silence. That night sleep came in fragments. Every time she drifted off, she was back in the vent, back on the ledge, back in the hallway with the boy who lowered his weapon. She woke sweating, heart racing, fingers digging into the sheets like they were concrete. At dawn, she gave up on sleep and sat by the window, watching the base come alive. Helicopters lifted. Soldiers moved. Life continued with cruel indifference. She felt small again. Not physically, internally. Later that day, the woman in the pressed uniform returned. This time, she closed the door behind her. "You don't have to stay," she said without preamble. Ara frowned. "Stay where?" "Here in this life." She studied Ara carefully. "What you did was extraordinary, but extraordinary things cost something. We don't pretend otherwise." Ara thought about the vent, the fall, the blood on tile. "What happens if I leave?" she asked. "You go somewhere safe. You finish growing up. You become something else." "And if I stay?" The woman didn't answer right away. "Then you carry this," she said finally, "and we try to make sure it doesn't break you." Ara looked out the window again. For a long time, she said nothing. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the Master Chief found her outside the infirmary, sitting on a crate, feet dangling, helmet beside her. "You don't have to decide today," he said. "I know," she replied. "But you're going to." She nodded. "I don't want to be invisible anymore," she said quietly, "but I don't want to be a symbol either." He considered that, then be a person first. She smiled faintly at that. It was the closest thing to comfort she'd heard since the mission. As night fell, the base lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere, laughter drifted through the air again, not mocking this time, just human. Ara pulled her jacket tighter around herself and breathed in the cool air. She didn't know who she would become after this. But she knew one thing with aching clarity. Surviving the mission had been the easy part. Living with it would take everything else she had left. Why did the last decision feel heavier than every trigger she had ever pulled? Ara Vance stood alone at the edge of the airstrip, dawn stretching thin and pale across the horizon. The runway lights hummed softly, a low mechanical breath that matched the slow rhythm she was trying to force into her chest. Aircraft sat in silhouette, dark shapes against a sky that promised movement, departure, continuation. She had been awake all night. Not packing. Not panicking. Just sitting with the weight of everything that hadn't followed her into sleep. The base was quieter than usual. Not empty, never empty, but subdued, like it knew something had changed and hadn't figured out how to respond yet. People passed her without stopping. Some nodded. Some didn't look at her at all. No one laughed. That unsettled her more than the laughter ever had. She heard footsteps and didn't turn. She already knew who it would be. The Master Chief stopped beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the horizon. No rank between them now. No authority. Just two people standing at the end of something. "They cleared the flight," he said. "Wheels up in 30 if you want it." Ira nodded once. Silence stretched. "You could stay," he added. "Different unit, different pace, training, time." She thought about the pressed uniform woman, the careful words, the offer that was also a warning. "I know," she said. He studied her profile, the bandage at her temple, the way she stood too still, like movement might make something spill out. "Whatever you decide," he said quietly, "you changed how a lot of people see the world." Ara looked down at her hands. The shaking had stopped. That scared her too. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I know." That was the thing. No one doubted her intentions anymore. They doubted themselves instead. When he left, she stayed where she was, watching the sun climb. Light crept across the runway, touching metal, glass, painted lines meant to guide machines that weighed tons and trusted the air to hold them. She wondered when she had started trusting herself less. Miller found her 10 minutes later. He didn't pretend it was a coincidence. "They're saying your name like it's a story now," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Like it belongs to something bigger." She grimaced. "I hate that." "Yeah," he agreed. "Me too." He kicked at the tarmac with the toe of his boot. "For what it's worth, I'm glad it was you." She glanced at him. "Why?" "Because you didn't do it for glory," he said, "or to prove anything. You did it because there wasn't another option." Ara looked back toward the horizon. "There's always another option." "Sometimes," he said, "but sometimes the cost is worse." They stood together in companionable quiet until the distant whine of engines signaled that time was running out. When the call came over the loudspeaker, it didn't use her name, just a flight number, a destination. Normalcy wrapped in procedure. She picked up her helmet and started walking. Each step felt deliberate, heavy, final. At the foot of the ramp, she stopped. The pressed uniform woman waited there, hands folded, expression unreadable. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes." "No conditions." Ara met her gaze. "One." The woman raised an eyebrow. "I don't want my story used to recruit," Ara said, "or to inspire, or to scare. I don't want to be a headline." A pause. "And if we say no?" "Then I stay," Ara replied, "and you'll have to decide whether that's worth it." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed," she said. "Your file will be sealed, your name will fade." Ara felt something in her chest loosen, not relief exactly, something closer to peace. As she climbed the ramp, she didn't look back. The interior of the aircraft was dim, utilitarian, stripped of comfort. She took a seat by the window and strapped in, fingers moving automatically. When the engine spooled up, the vibration rattled through her bones, grounding her in the present moment. As the plane lifted, the base shrank beneath her. Buildings, lights, people becoming shapes, then memories. She didn't cry. She watched until it disappeared. Hours later, somewhere between sky and nowhere, exhaustion finally claimed her. Not the heavy, dreamless sleep she'd known after missions, but something softer, something tentative. She dreamed of vents and hallways and falling, yes. But she also dreamed of open spaces, of rooms with windows, of breathing without counting. When she woke, the plane was descending. The place they landed wasn't important. That was the point. Weeks passed. Then months. Ara learned how to exist without constant vigilance. It wasn't easy. Some days the world felt too loud, too fast, too careless. She startled at sudden noises. She measured exits without meaning to. Other days she laughed and surprised herself with the sound. She went to school, sat in classrooms where no one knew her history, where her size was just a fact, not a liability, where mistakes were allowed. Sometimes she missed the clarity of the mission, the brutal simplicity of survival. Sometimes she missed the people. One afternoon a letter arrived, no return address, no insignia. Just a few lines. "We made it home. All of us. Thank you." She folded it carefully and tucked it into a book. Years later, long after the story had lost its sharp edges, someone would ask her why she never talked about what she did. Ara would think for a moment before answering. Because the moment mattered, she'd say, not the legend. Because she understood something now that she hadn't then. That strength doesn't always announce itself. That courage doesn't need witnesses. That the quietest choices often carry the greatest weight. And that sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.